Imagine waking up every morning with an unyielding sense of purpose, in complete harmony with your true self. Consider living as the person you were always meant to be, without a shadow of doubt, fear, or the burden of others' expectations. What if the key to your transformation has always been within you, patiently waiting for the moment you claim it? And what if, by the end of this exciting journey, you discover a truth so profound that it will forever change your perception of yourself and the world around you? Together, we will delve into the powerful ideas of Friedrich Nietzsche, a thinker who challenged societal norms and urged each individual to unlock their potential. Nietzsche argued that most people never reach the heights they are capable of, remaining trapped by conformity, comfort, and self-doubt. He was convinced that true greatness is only accessible to those who have the courage to break free from these chains, embrace the challenges of fate, and create their own unique meaning in life. However, the real test of strength lies elsewhere. Only a few are willing to embark on this path, as it demands something that most people diligently avoid: a feeling of discomfort. From the earliest days of our lives, we are presented with a certain life plan to follow. Society dictates who we should be, what we should value, and how we should act. We are rewarded for conforming to accepted norms, for following established rules, for transforming into a version of ourselves that will be approved by others. However, Friedrich Nietzsche saw a cunning trap in this. He warned that the price of conformity is the loss of one's own individuality. The philosopher was convinced that those who never dare to challenge the expectations placed upon them are doomed to exist in the shadow of who they could truly become. Have you ever had the feeling that deep down there is a stronger, wiser, and more powerful version of yourself than the one you show to the world? This is not just a figment of your imagination. Nietzsche believed that within each person lies untapped potential, a powerful force that, when awakened, can lead to a life filled with genuine satisfaction. He termed this concept the Übermensch, not referring to a being superior to others, but to a person who has overcome their own limitations and become the most complete embodiment of themselves. However, it must be acknowledged that personal transformation does not occur in an atmosphere of serenity and convenience. Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher, urged us not to run from suffering, but to welcome it as an integral part of human existence. He argued that it is in struggle that the spirit is tempered and a strong character is formed. His famous saying, "That which does not kill me makes me stronger," is not just a motivational slogan, but a profound statement about the nature of personal growth. Recall the most difficult periods of your life, when it seemed that failures, losses, and disappointments were about to break you. But weren't these trials an opportunity to rise above circumstances and become better? Nietzsche viewed difficulties as a test of strength, as a crucible in which the true essence of a person is revealed. Those who seek only comfort risk remaining weak, while those who bravely face adversity gain the ability to transform. Nietzsche's philosophy contains another radical idea. The meaning of life is not given from the outside, but is created by the individual. Many people spend years searching for a purpose, waiting for external signs to guide them. Nietzsche categorically rejected this approach. He believed that life has no predetermined meaning, but only acquires the meaning that we ourselves give it. This contains both a frightening and inspiring truth. There is no predetermined path, no predetermined destiny. A person becomes the creator of their own life, the architect of their own history. But where to begin this journey of self-determination? The first step requires honest and deep self-analysis. Does one live in accordance with their true beliefs and desires, or simply play a role imposed by society? Friedrich Nietzsche spoke of the herd instinct, the tendency of people to blindly follow the majority without thinking about the purpose of this movement. The herd offers an illusion of security, predictability, and belonging, but in return demands the abandonment of individuality. To unlock one's potential and become who one is destined to be, it is necessary to have the courage to separate from the herd. This does not mean a complete break with society, but rather a critical reflection on assimilated values and an independent determination of what is truly important. It requires the courage to remain true to oneself, even when it goes against the expectations of others. On this path, discomfort from encountering the unknown is inevitable, but it is in this uncertainty that the potential for real growth and self-development lies. It is here at this crossroads that most people meet their defeat. They cherish dreams of change, but deep down they tremble before the inevitable difficulties that these changes will entail. Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher, was unwavering in his thought. Genuine transformation is impossible without prior destruction. One must find within oneself the willingness to part without regret with old, obsolete identities, with outdated beliefs that no longer meet the demands of the times, and with limiting fears that shackle one's potential. One needs to muster the courage to step into the unknown, to risk failure along the way, to stoically endure all the hardships and trials, because only by going through the fire of these adversities can one forge oneself anew and become something fundamentally greater and more significant than one was before. And now, at this very moment, one may ask a perfectly legitimate question. What specific practical steps should be taken to start this exciting yet frightening journey? How to begin the process of freeing oneself from the expectations that have subtly shaped one's personality over many years. How to learn to turn struggle into a source of inexhaustible strength, doubt into unwavering self-confidence, and hesitation into decisive and purposeful action. But this, as they say, is only the beginning of the road. What awaits a person ahead will challenge them in perhaps the most unpredictable way, so that they can finally break free from the limitations that have been imposed on them by society, circumstances, or themselves. And the first thing to start this complex process of self-improvement is to develop a deep and comprehensive self-awareness. Nietzsche was convinced that the vast majority of people never bother to truly know themselves, to look into the most hidden corners of their souls. The reason for this lies in the fact that they are too absorbed in striving to live up to the expectations of others, to conform to the standards and ideas imposed on them from the outside about what they should be. People often adopt beliefs, aspirations, and thoughts that do not actually belong to them. Thus, they find themselves trapped in deception, mistakenly taking socially imposed attitudes for their true essence. But who is hiding under this mask? If you discard the influence of upbringing, cultural norms, and the opinions of others, what will remain in the end? This is a difficult question that requires deep reflection and a willingness to face unpleasant truths. In the process of self-analysis, a person may realize that most of their ideas about themselves are just a mask that they have been taught to wear. Friedrich Nietzsche considered such self-analysis to be the foundation of personal strength. In his opinion, only by comprehending oneself at a deep level does one acquire the ability to build one's life in accordance with one's own desires and not with the expectations of others. However, self-awareness alone is not enough. Having realized how external forces have shaped the personality, it is necessary to take active steps to free oneself from their influence. One of the most effective ways to achieve a fulfilling life is what the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche defined as self-overcoming. This term implies a person's continuous striving to go beyond their own limitations, overcome fears, and transform themselves into a stronger, wiser, and more competent individual. This process, which requires considerable self-discipline, courage, and unwavering dedication to personal growth, encompasses the entire life. Self-overcoming is not just about achieving certain goals. It is a deep inner transformation. Nietzsche argued that people who do not strive for constant development are doomed to stagnation, finding themselves trapped in routine and dissatisfaction. Such people are prone to resentment and blaming the world around them for their failures, instead of taking responsibility for their own development. That is why the philosopher was so critical of the position of victim, considering it a form of self-limitation, a rejection of personal strength and opportunities. The reality is that no one will come to the rescue. There is no external force capable of instantly filling life with meaning. Nietzsche rejected the idea of passively waiting for salvation, whether from society, religious institutions, or predestined fate. He emphasized that the meaning of life, if it exists at all, must come from within the person. Everyone must independently determine the goals of their existence, give meaning to their experience, transform pain into wisdom, and obstacles into new opportunities for growth and development. However, achieving significant heights requires a person to be willing to face what most people carefully avoid: trials and tribulations. Friedrich Nietzsche, an outstanding thinker, did not idealize suffering as such, but deeply realized its inevitable role in the process of becoming a person. The philosopher was convinced that greatness is forged in the crucible of hardship, that true strength is born not from a desire to avoid struggle, but from a conscious acceptance of it. This is why Nietzsche so insistently warned against the temptations of excessive comfort. He saw comfort as a cunning, insidious killer of human potential, something that gradually weakens the spirit and dulls the will to act. He believed that those who constantly seek only pleasure and easy paths will never achieve anything truly valuable or lasting. This idea can be difficult to accept, as modern society persistently trains us to avoid any manifestation of pain and discomfort. We are taught to seek instant gratification, to drown out unpleasant sensations with entertainment and distractions, to run from problems instead of facing them boldly. However, Nietzsche argued that such a flight from difficulties inevitably leads to inner emptiness and disappointment. He urged us to act in a completely different way, not to avoid difficulties but to boldly meet them, to voluntarily enter the fire of adversity, realizing that this is the only path to true transformation and spiritual growth. It is worth thinking about those moments in life when a person felt most alive and full of energy. Were these periods of serene calm and comfort, or were they the moments when you had to overcome serious obstacles, when you faced challenges that made you grow and develop? The fateful moments of our lives rarely coincide with periods of well-being and serenity. True greatness manifests itself in moments of trial, when we are forced to surpass our own ideas about the limits of what is possible. It is no coincidence that Friedrich Nietzsche admired personalities who did not avoid struggle, but on the contrary, welcomed it. Among them, he saw the true creators of meaning, people who did not allow circumstances to dictate their fate, but took their lives into their own hands, becoming the architects of their destiny. This life principle was defined by the philosopher as amor fati, love of fate. Its essence lies not in the passive acceptance of fate's blows, but in a conscious and active attitude towards them, in recognizing them as an integral part of one's personal path. But how to embody this philosophy in reality? How to learn to see life's difficulties not as obstacles, but as incentives for self-improvement? The key to the answer lies in our thinking. Nietzsche argued that it is the interpretation of events that shapes our perception of reality. Two people facing the same adversities can react completely differently. One will see it as a tragedy, the other as an opportunity for personal growth. The decisive factor is how each of them understands and perceives their struggle. To unlock the potential inherent in every human being from birth, it is necessary to learn to perceive life's trials as valuable lessons and failures as an incentive for growth and progress towards greatness. This is not a call to ignore pain or deny difficulties. Rather, it is about recognizing these negative aspects, accepting them as part of the life experience, and using them as a powerful catalyst for further movement forward. This is where true strength lies. When a person begins to perceive struggle as an integral part of their development, they become practically invulnerable. The fear of failure disappears as each defeat is seen as a stage of evolution. Resistance to difficulties gives way to the understanding that it is they who form character and prepare for something greater. Dependence on external evaluation is replaced by a desire to create a solid internal foundation that cannot be shaken. However, this is only the starting point. For a deeper understanding, it is necessary to turn to Nietzsche's philosophy, which contains the key to unlocking a person's full potential, linking together all the elements of self-improvement. To truly delve into Nietzsche's ideas and unlock your potential, you need to overcome the last obstacle, fear, that invisible force that keeps many from living life to the fullest. Fear is a quiet voice, convincing you to stay put, avoid risks, and prefer safety to development. However, Nietzsche argued that fear should not be avoided, but subdued. It exists to keep us within familiar frameworks, which are often illusory, created by past experiences, social norms, and other people's opinions about our capabilities. By allowing fears to determine our choices, we doom ourselves to imprisonment within the boundaries that hold us back, becoming prisoners of our own doubts. Nietzsche called for boldly facing our fears without waiting for them to disappear. It is through overcoming fear that courage is born. He saw fear as a test that separates those who remain in stagnation from those who strive for new heights. What is the deep-seated fear that holds a person back at this moment? What is this task that is consciously necessary to perform, yet persistently avoided? After all, overcoming this threshold can radically change the course of life. However, Friedrich Nietzsche warned of another, more insidious trap of the human mind: resentment. Resentment is a state of mind in which an individual tends to blame others for their own failures and stagnation. It is the fate of those who prefer to see themselves as victims of circumstances rather than creators of their own destiny. It is a deep conviction that the world owes them some kind of debt, that their failures are the result of external forces and not the consequence of personal decisions and actions. Resentment is dangerous because it deprives a person of willpower and the ability to influence their life. The very moment the subject shifts the blame to external factors, be it upbringing, circumstances, or the actions of other people, they voluntarily relinquish control over their own transformation and development. Nietzsche was implacable towards this way of thinking. He firmly believed that a strong personality would not waste precious time on fruitless complaints about the injustice of the world. Instead, such a person takes full responsibility for their life, becoming its true master and architect. The realization that a person is not in control of all circumstances, but always retains control over their reaction to them, becomes both a liberating and discouraging discovery. After all, this means abandoning familiar excuses and acknowledging one's own responsibility for what is happening. Every limitation that a person considers insurmountable is actually just an illusion that they can destroy. It is here that Nietzsche's radical concept of eternal recurrence comes into play. Imagine that you have to live this very life again and again, with all its vicissitudes and twists of fate. Every decision you make, every moment of doubt, every fear you succumb to, all of this will be repeated endlessly. This thought experiment, called eternal recurrence, is designed to make a person think about an important question. If they had to experience this life forever, would they be proud of the choices they make? Most people faced with this dilemma come to the disappointing conclusion that their current existence is far from the ideal they would like to perpetuate. They settle for less, allowing fear to dictate their terms, and passively wait for external changes instead of taking their destiny into their own hands. The main task of this concept is not to affirm the reality of eternal recurrence, but to stimulate a deep awareness of the current moment of life. If the thought of an endless repetition of life evokes a feeling of deep regret, this serves as a signal for immediate change. It is here that Nietzsche's philosophical ideas manifest their transformative power. They call not only for a change in thinking, but also for active actions aimed at bold decisions that were previously avoided. It's about getting out of your comfort zone and boldly facing the unknown, becoming a person who, faced with the prospect of an endless repetition of life, will answer with an unwavering yes. But how to achieve this state? The path begins with small but daily manifestations of courage, with making decisions based on the desire for the ideal self and not on past actions. This implies a willingness to take risks, challenge yourself, and refuse to submit to fear. The process of rethinking the inner world begins, a transition from the psychology of avoidance to the psychology of action. Friedrich Nietzsche, an outstanding thinker, argued that the real tragedy lies not in defeats, but in an existence overshadowed by the fear of failure. Indecision, in his opinion, is the main obstacle to greatness, since the price for illusory security is disproportionately high compared to the price that can be paid for risk. In the end, a person will regret not those attempts that ended in failure, but those opportunities for which there was not enough courage. At some point in life, there may be an acute sense of awareness of missed opportunities. A person may realize the need for change, face their fears, and make decisions that have been postponed for a long time. And this is certainly a positive shift, indicating that the individual is at a crossroads. They can continue to follow the beaten path or embark on the path of transformation. However, there is another important aspect of Nietzsche's philosophy that has not yet been considered, the most powerful idea that can radically change life if fully embraced. In the final part, the main key to self-realization and transformation into the person the individual was originally intended to become will be revealed. It's time to turn to the strongest concept that unites everything and allows you to unlock the full potential of the individual. In Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy, the concept of the Übermensch, or Superman, occupies a special place, representing more than just an individual freed from the shackles of societal constraints. It's not merely a person who has triumphed over fear, embraced the challenge of struggle, and taken responsibility for their own destiny. The Übermensch is the apex of human development, a being that has risen above the mundane and created its own values, its own purpose, and a unique meaning for its existence. Nietzsche bitterly noted that the vast majority of people are mired in the quagmire of conformism. They blindly follow rules set by others, accept beliefs without critical analysis, and live according to outdated moral dogmas instead of creating their own ethical compass. However, the Übermensch resolutely rejects such a lifestyle. He does not passively accept imposed values, but creates his own, guided by an internal compass. He determines what matters, decides what is valuable, and charts his own unique life path without needing anyone's approval or permission. It is here that Nietzsche's philosophy takes its most radical turn. To unlock one's potential and become what fate has intended, one cannot rely on external guidance or wait for someone else to point out a purpose in life. A person must independently define their path and meaning of existence. The complexity lies in the inevitable confrontation with uncertainty, in the voluntary rejection of the comfort and predictability of well-trodden paths. However, according to Nietzsche, this path is the only authentic way of existence. Independent creation of values implies acceptance of full responsibility for one's own life, a refusal to shift blame for failures onto external circumstances. A person ceases to passively await ready-made meanings and begins to create them from within, becoming the architect of their own destiny. The Übermensch does not seek the approval of others, does not try to conform to generally accepted standards or earn recognition. He is entirely driven by internal motives, guided by his own compass, not by external assessment. This is where his freedom lies. Having stopped seeking approval and confirmation from others, he becomes invulnerable, impervious to control through fear, rejection, or social expectations. However, becoming an Übermensch is not a one-time act, but a lengthy process, a continuous journey of transformation and unremitting self-overcoming. Nietzsche did not believe in the existence of final destinations, viewing life as a constant state of becoming, where the only goal is continuous development and ascension above one's former self. The most important insight that comes with experience is that there is no external force standing in the way of self-realization. The only one who erects barriers is the person himself. Doubts that torment the soul, fears that paralyze the will, justifications that sound like a mantra, these are the true barriers to success. As soon as an individual finds the courage to discard them, as soon as he wholeheartedly dedicates himself to the chosen path, the world around him transforms. However, it should be remembered that commitment is the cornerstone of any endeavor. Many heeding these words will not do anything at all. They will feel a fleeting surge of inspiration, but soon return to their old habits, old fears, and established patterns of behavior. If a person seeks to break out of this vicious circle, if he longs to find his strength, he must act immediately. Therefore, it is worth asking the question, what is the first step? What can be done today to start this transformation? Perhaps it is a face-to-face encounter with a fear that a person has been carefully avoiding. Perhaps it is the making of a decision that he has been putting off for a long time, or maybe it is the final rejection of excuses that hinder his progress. Whatever it is, do not hesitate and waver, because life is not a dress rehearsal. The here and now moment is a unique opportunity to choose who to become. Friedrich Nietzsche created his works not for those who prefer to remain in the shadows and go with the flow, but for energetic individuals striving for complete independence and ready to accept the challenge of fate. If the reader finds himself among those who are inspired by Nietzsche's ideas, then he has already embarked on the path of change and self-improvement. Now he faces a key question. Will he have the determination to go further? This choice will be decisive for his entire future life. Thank you for your